afternoon. So this concept of operations will brief Operation Eastern Buildup, a two-phase notional logistics scenario that establishes a permanent humanitarian assistance and disaster relief platform on the U.S. territory of Guam. So I talked about the storyline yesterday a little bit. This is part two, and we touched on how it has been demonstrated that logistics and supply chain inadequacies, along with poor planning, exacerbates humanitarian crises and response mechanisms. So errors in preparation and responsiveness of the humanitarian supply chain have far-reaching and long-lasting effects. And so we wanted to take a look at some mitigative effects, and then a part two of this, not to confuse too much, but we would like to see how the civilian response mechanism can possibly augment or even relieve the initial military response mechanism. So a pre-positioned HADR material platform in Guam would reduce logistical lines of communication by 65% and further enable immediate action from locally based USAID responder and a multitude of partnering NGOs far quicker. So yesterday we covered this slide right here is broken up by leg. So the first leg would be out of San Diego to Hawaii at the port of Honolulu. So the 3 points would be Port of San Diego 1, and then Port of Honolulu 2, where they'd be a day and a half, and then they would transload a portion of the cargo to add complexity to this exercise, and they would fly then air cargo with a very difficult load called an MV-200 out of Hickam or Honolulu International Airport to Guam. The other two ships, the other 2.5 ships, would then continue on for the 9-day final journey to the port of Guam. Then down here at the bottom, so that would be leg 2. So there's two distinct legs to this. Leg 1 is the 5 days. And then the dates are completely notional. The second leg would be 2 parts, the air, which would be an 8-hour flight, and then the 9 days of the 2.5 remaining TEU containers. Down here you get just a bird's eye view of the Air Force Base. Well, and no, Anderson's on the other side, but this is Antonio B. Wonpat International Air Base. And then this is in the, for situational awareness, it's in the northwest corner of Guam. These are the air projection fans. So the way this was set up was you've got projection levels 1 through 3. Projection level would be minimum lead times with essential support for the distribution network under 6 hours. So most of these areas right here within Region 1 would include Micronesia, and some of the islands that are nearby. Those would be all projection level 1 territories, and then possibly up to Taiwan. Level 2 or projection level 2, the lead times would be greater than 4 hours, but probably less than 10 hours. And so now you're talking like Vietnam, Malaysia, or no, Hong Kong, Indonesia, possibly Japan. And then, of course, projection level 3 would be the longer lead time. So greater than 6 hours with essential support arriving through the distribution network of more than 10 hours. So it would take more than 10 hours to get classes of supply to these regions. So just a quick way to kind of plan for a projection. And then this is the, once we had an air operations group established, this is the general layout. It would be assigned by projection levels, as you can see right here. You want to marshal your supplies, marshal your all classes of supply according to the projection level. They'd be co-located with all of the major carriers. It would be overseen by FEMA. So FEMA would maintain the headquarters, the health services, mortuary affairs, supervise and enable the life support packages, and then oversee contractor support along with the International Association of Contract Management. So IACM would work closely with FEMA to make sure that all the contracts were managed correctly. And then the major carriers are Korean Air Cargo, UPS, and Cathay Pacific for East Asia. So you'll see a lot of civilian, and like I mentioned earlier, a secondary aspect of this strategic mission is to flex the response capabilities of the civilian logistics community and the commercial supply chain industry. Because historically, the U.S. military is always the primary response mechanism relied upon to most humanitarian assistance, disaster relief efforts. The U.S. Navy, so specifically the Military Sealift Command and the U.S. Air Force Air Mobility Command, will not be participating in this logistics and supply chain event, nor any of the entities providing coordinating efforts at any stage, unless a real-world event would necessitate and/or intervention during the build-up stage. And then all the basics, this is real granular, but you can see the traffic flow right here into the ready hold area, into the marshalling area would be unidirectional. So we've got all the marshalling areas right here. And then when cargo is outbound for shipment out for deployment, for rapid deployment, it follows this pattern. And then we have to have an exit to the port. So this is Highway 8 right here. Outbound to port, Guam Highway 8. This chart right here shows a model of emergency recovery. So normally the response mechanisms from the military is very robust, and it surges right here. So within 24 to 48 hours, they can throw tremendous resources at response for humanitarian assistance, and they always do. Especially the Navy and the Air Force, usually the first ones with the Marines on site. But you got 82nd Airborne, and you've got all these different fast deploying units within 24 hours to quickly respond, and they've got tremendous resources that they can throw at a situation, at an emerging situation, and of course they've got the assets immediately available. There's no funding usually involved. That's usually freed up immediately, and they've got operational funds that are allocated for emergencies. So the civilian response is conversely very slow to start. But you can see once they get into reconstruction and rebuilding, they've got more capability, and they've got kind of a longer sustainment effort as far as helping recover. The sweet spot is right here, the confluence of both the military. As the military starts to draw down over time, after the foodstuffs have been established, life support has been established, some emergency rescues have taken place, the military will start to draw down, in the civilian sector, specifically the NGOs, are going to start to ramp up. So you've got the sweet spot right here at the confluence of the two, where you've got tremendous energy, tremendous resourcing. And so taking a look at that as a third part of this analysis would be to try to see what can be done, what are the critical activities or things that need to happen during this stage when you've got most resources on site. Eventually we'd like to get the civilian response mechanism, something like this, where they kind of stable off, where we've got the resources immediately available or much faster responding, but also there for the long haul to help with the sustainment. Going back to the Air Operations Group, just to touch on that again. So that has been assembled to manage the first response to all HADR efforts in East Asia. And so they bring together FEMA, USAID, UNICEF, along with FedEx, UPS, Cathay Pacific, Korean Air Cargo representatives. And then they bring together this collaborative coordination cell, which coordinates all first response air support to East Asia. Subsequent slides tomorrow or the day after will discuss the POG, which is the Port Operations Group, to manage the highly specialized and scaled support activities after emergency responses have been out. So that first push through air is going to be for the first 96 hours. So the first 96 hours, that's when the Air Operation Group kicks in. Their focal point is to focus on the immediate needs of the evacuees. And so for the planning factor for that, it's 4 pounds of food per day, 125 ounces of water per day per person for 40,000 people as the planning factor. And like I mentioned, the second phase of the HADR effort will be to see to the surface deployment of all subsistence to sustain the victims for 30 days or more as determined by the situation. The number of victims involved, the remaining infrastructure, and then the early build efforts. So during this phase, the additional mandate of building partner capacity is initiated. So the Port Operations Group is going to have a much larger mission, a much longer mission, and those non-traditional partnerships are going to be flexed. So that's when you start bringing in the sustainment professionals. Regional resources and engineer capabilities are of highest priority during this phase. The Port Operations Group at the Port of Guam will serve as the fusion center for the coordination and execution of all of these activities. So I'll talk about that in the next segment. Thanks for watching. Leave comments below.